Hello and welcome to India First, your fortnightly window to the matters of security, defense and strategic affairs. Today we are going to discuss the India-Pakistan dynamic. For more than a month after India carried out the surgical strikes on terrorist camps along the line of control in Pak-occupied Kashmir, the situation in the border, both on the line of control and the international border, has been fluid. Pakistan has tried to up the ante through constant ceasefire violations and repeated attempts to push in well-armed and well-trained infiltrators into Jammu and Kashmir. It has targeted civilian areas like before, forcing India to retaliate forcefully. This response from Pakistan to the surgical strikes was expected, and Indian forces have been prepared to deal with it. But how will the situation pan out in the next few weeks? Will the outgoing Pakistan Army Chief get an extension beyond his retirement date towards the end of November? If not, will he attempt an adventure along the line of control? Is the ceasefire on the LOC now as good as dead? And what are the internal dynamics in Pakistan that will drive Pakistan's India policy? To discuss all that, we have an eminent panel with us, with Lieutenant General Mukesh Sabharwal, a former GOC of the 15th Corps, and to my extreme left, Mr. T.C. Raghavan, India's former High Commissioner to Pakistan. Welcome, both of you. If I can start with you, General, if you see the kind of ceasefire violations and the firing, exchange of fire that is taking place, what do you make of it? Because there is a notional ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan on the LOC and the IB, but that doesn't seem to hold anymore.
Yeah, you are very right. Actually, the ceasefire, as we are all aware, November 2003. So now 13 years have passed, but it has had its ups and downs. If you remember, after 2008, it had again gone up, kept on going up till 2012. Then suddenly, for kind of not much reason, it came down, and last year onwards it did pick up. But certainly after the cross-military border strike, which India has taken now, there has been a sudden spurt, which, like you rightly said again, was expected. But the intensity, because if you notice that in this last month or so, there have been something like 68 or 70 border violations. As compared to the last year, the same period, it is something like 40% more than that.
Exactly.
So it was expected. But it was, the point is, intensity is also varying. It is not at every place. We know that at areas which we are at a disadvantage, you would like to do a little more of that.
That's right.
But then there could be much more, and if we think that this is the last which we are talking of, the ceasefire violations, I think we are
mistaken on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but if you see, also India's response has been quite strong. I mean, there have been reports about border posts and Pakistani army posts being destroyed and razed to the ground. So that also shows that India was prepared to deal with this kind of response from Pakistan.
Yeah, because for those doubters who thought that the Indian army just did one strike and that was the end of it, had to realize that in case they did something more, and which they did. And when they did those things, we are all aware of the actions they have taken. But the response has been very quick, and it has been very intense. It not been said about it, which there is no need to say about it. I think the silence just tells its own story. Why do you think it is continuing? Because they have been hurt, and hurt badly.
That's right.
So I think from there it emerges that the actions have been very strong, have been very swift, have been very effective. And this would actually now, whether it is Raheel Sharif or whoever comes to succeed him, the point is that they would be well aware that it is no longer the same rules. There has been a change in the rules.
In the approach that India has taken.
Absolutely.
Mr. Raghavan, you spent time, much time in Pakistan. What do you think is the internal dynamic that could drive its India policy as it exists today in Pakistan?
Well, there are many internal drivers in Pakistan of India policy in particular. But certainly one factor which is very important is the state of the civil-military equation, or the civil-military relationship. And within that, internal changes in the Pakistan military hierarchy always indicate a certain turbulence to be expected in the India-Pakistan relationship. Historically, if one looks at it for the last 10-12 years, every time there's been a turnover in the military hierarchy, there's also been turbulence on the LOC and in general in the India-Pakistan environment.
Right.
So I would say, of course, apart from many other factors, but the situation which we've seen in the last 6 to 8 months has to do with those internal factors in Pakistan too.
Right. But by internal factors, do you also mean that if the question of the $1 million question, as they keep saying, that the extension to the army chief, whether he gives it himself or he gets it notionally from the civilian government, is that also one of the factors that could lead to the kind of turbulence that we are seeing?
I think the turbulence is caused by the fact of uncertainty at the top.
Right.
Who's the next person or set of persons going to be?
Right.
And that, at least historically, has led to a certain amount of jostling down the line. We noticed the same thing which the general mentioned in 2007, 2008 at the time of the Musharraf-Kayani transition.
Right.
And similarly from 2012, 2013 for the next year or so,
Right.
as Kayani's future became more cloudy.
Yes.
So to that extent, certainly the present set of events have, if not been predictable, certainly were anticipated to some extent.
Right. I'll come back to how the India-Pakistan relations may pan out in the next few months or a year down the line. But come back to the LOC and the Indian response, or the Indian Army and the Indian Security Forces response. There was some talk, amongst some of the security experts who have written about it, that maybe this generation of soldiers who are now deployed, who got used to ceasefire, kind of a little peace on the border, they are not used to this kind of exchange of fire. So maybe they are not adequately prepared. Would you subscribe to that?
No, it's easy to kind of come to such conclusions, but particularly I've seen both sides of the story, both at the LOC, at the line of control, as
Right.
well as in the hinterland.
Right.
You see, our soldiers, our young officers keep rotating. They go towards the Rashtra Rifle, they
Right.
come out, they've been blooded in the counter-terrorist operations.
Sure.
So seeing or handling a bullet flying is not a new thing for them at all. Now, when they come to the line of control, also the amount of time, the repetitions which keep taking place,
Yes.
and like I mentioned, the border has never really been silent.
Right.
So considering that, it just takes one action for a battalion to jigger up very, very quickly
Yes.
as to what they are supposed to do. So I don't think
We should come to that conclusion.
Yeah, we shouldn't come, there is complacency of any sort. I think the battalions are doing a wonderful job, and I'm sure they'll rise to the occasion at every time.
Right, and I think also the increased, media scrutiny also somehow magnifies the losses. One person killed somewhere, one soldier, martyred in cross-border firing. That sort of suddenly becomes big, although we have had much more losses in the past. Would you agree to that dynamic?
Yes,
coming
that
into the
too
equation?
is true, because like we just take this case of very unfortunate, the young boy Gursevak. Now, fact is that he was about to get married, so
Right.
the human angle comes to it, and
Yes.
etc. And people, and rightly so, they are bothered, and anybody would be.
Sure.
But the media dimension takes it a little more towards that. But the cross-border violation and the casualties which will occur, that will continue. And let's not forget the civilian casualties.
Yeah,
You see,
exactly.
the civilian casualties in these areas have been really, in the sense that over from 1971 or 65, even before that, they've been having these casualties all through.
That's
At the time of Kargil, if you know, 50,000 people, they were evacuated,
displaced, yeah.
and then they had to go back.
Sure.
Some people couldn't back, their houses are destroyed.
Right.
So I think for the civilians too, although the government, I think the shelters have come up
Yes.
over a period of time.
Right.
And even for the army, I think the number of shelters, etc., which was there during Kargil and 2003,
Yeah.
that period actually was very intense, when we used to have our fire assaults, etc.
Right.
Now that kind of casualties, if you look back, and those who have seen,
Yeah.
for them these casualties
Are
would
nothing.
like, but each casualty I cannot
has its
say
own
so.
tragedy and its own
Absolutely.
story. Yeah, that's of course true. But you've seen, Mr. Raghavan, the Pakistani response to anything that India does. Like in 2013, 14, when the BSF was doing the fire assault on the IB, what was the Pakistani reaction in their country?
The response is more or less on standard lines, that we are deeply and fully committed to the ceasefire, and it is Indian provocative actions which are undermining that ceasefire.
Right.
I think that narrative is to be expected, and it is meant entirely for public consumption domestically. The people who matter know what the situation is, and when you talk to them privately, they would say a slightly different line, that the ceasefire violations are tactical, and strategically and politically we are committed to maintaining the ceasefire on the line of control as also on the IB.
Right.
And I think that part of the narrative is really what we should focus on, because in the end, the ceasefire has been as much in our interest as it has been in Pakistan.
That's true.
So to look at, and I think to look at more carefully the tactical aspect of ceasefire violations, and to ensure that they remain localized, do not spread, do not escalate.
Sure.
I think that is very, very important.
But to start off or sort of look back at the start of the current phase of turbulence on the LOC or the IB, would you see this as the starting point was the coming of the BJP PDP government in Kashmir as something that Pakistanis never wanted, or the Pakistani deep establishment was uncomfortable with?
I think certainly the Pakistani establishment was deeply uncomfortable with the idea of a PDP-BJP alliance ruling Jammu and Kashmir, and they saw this as a strategic setback, and they would certainly try to do what they could to undermine that to undermine that government.
Right.
Nevertheless, there have been other developments also in India-Pakistan relations.
Sure.
And possibly one of the reasons also is the fact that you had a government in India which was prepared to take very dramatic steps towards reaching out and overlook provocations as they occurred. And certainly the Prime Minister's visit to Lahore was one indication of that.
Yes.
So I would like to see what has happened in the last 6-8 months as part of a larger spectrum of the different developments which have taken
rather
place.
than seeing it in single parts.
Rather than seeing it in single parts, although I will say that Pakistani discomfort with developments in J&K has been very evident for the last 2 years.
Great. We will talk about more of what's happening in J&K, and also what is going to be the future roadmap for India-Pakistan relations. Will there be reconciliation? Just after this short commercial break. Don't go anywhere. We'll come back.
प्रकाश सूर्या, जीवन भर साथ का वादा, दमदार मजबूती की मिसाल। प्रकाश सूर्या GI पाइप्स चले सालों साल।
अब ना होगा KYC का झंझट
और ना मार्जिन पेमेंट का।
और टैक्स भी नहीं देना पड़ेगा और ना हमारा नाम कहीं पे आएगा।
इसे कहते हैं डब्बा ट्रेडिंग।
इसी को कहते हैं
डब्बा गुल, क्योंकि ताली कभी एक हाथ से नहीं बजती, इसलिए डब्बा ट्रेडिंग करना या करवाना दोनों ही कानूनन अपराध हैं। सिर्फ सेबी रिकॉग्नाइज्ड स्टॉक एक्सचेंज पे ही ट्रेडिंग कीजिए। सेबी, हर इन्वेस्टर की ताकत।
बचपन से ही मुझे पता था आई वाज अ बॉर्न लीडर, और इस बात का एहसास दिलाया मेरी पहली जॉब ने। वो सब सिखाया जो कोई और नौकरी नहीं सिखा सकती। मैन मैनेजमेंट, टाइम मैनेजमेंट, क्राइसिस मैनेजमेंट, सब कुछ। पहले ही दिन से मैं टीम को लीड कर रहा था, और जितने साल मैंने बिताए उससे कई ज्यादा एक्सपीरियंस मिला मुझे। और सबसे अच्छी बात, माय फर्स्ट जॉब मेड माय सेकंड करियर पॉसिबल।
हम है भारत के सबसे एक्साइटिंग वर्कप्लेस और हम दे रहे हैं आपको एक ऑफर। भारतीय सेना, आम नहीं ये जिंदगी।
अब मैं अपने लाइफ की सबसे बड़ी मूवमेंट लीड करने जा रहा हूँ, जो इंडिया के लिए बहुत जरूरी है। आपको खड़ा होना पड़ेगा मेरे साथ टीम स्वच्छ भारत मिशन का हिस्सा बनकर, और हम सब मिलकर एक ऐसा इंडिया बनाएंगे जहाँ हर कोई टॉयलेट यूज करता हो, क्योंकि जब सब टॉयलेट यूज करेंगे तो सब प्रोग्रेस करेंगे।
क्या आपका फ्लैट भूकंप से सुरक्षित है? नया फ्लैट खरीदते वक्त किसी स्ट्रक्चरल इंजीनियर से सलाह लें। क्या यहाँ सॉइल टेस्टिंग किया गया है? क्या घर नेशनल बिल्डिंग कोड के मुताबिक बना है? याद रहे, घर सुरक्षित तो आप सुरक्षित। आपके हित में तत्पर NDMA।
Welcome back. We are discussing India-Pakistan dynamic and of course the situation in Jammu and Kashmir. General Sabharwal, the security forces in Jammu and Kashmir and of course the way they deal with the situation on the line of control or the IB is now quite well known. You know, they've prepared and they were ready to expect that kind of an assault. But in your assessment, as the winter sets in now, what is the sort of possible outcome or fallout of the number of militants who or the terrorists? The numbers have increased, is what some intelligence reports say, in the hinterland. So what should be India's or the security forces strategy there?
See, both things are possible. One, if you notice that in the last couple of winters, also infiltration hasn't really reduced. So one should be very clear on that. It generally reduces because of the terrain and climatic conditions. So that is a taken.
It's a given. Yeah.
It's an absolute. But the fact is that they have still been doing so. So we have to be on guard even at that particular point. This cross-border violation and especially the bat actions which continue, this will slow down because of once the winter sets in, you know, for him to come, the cover is gone and things for him to do those type of things will reduce. Now coming to the hinterland, numbers have increased over because like you're rightly saying, there has been little more infiltration since the last year. And so numbers are there. Plus there has been more recruitment. There is also not denying that fact. So the numbers are there. And also post this Burhan Wani, there has to be the sentiment which has gone up. So the counter-terrorist operations would have to be, we cannot be complacent or sit down just because it's winter and it is, because this is the time he also likes to, you know, hibernate and get inside his own hideouts, etc. But the security forces know what exactly is to be done, and there should be no let up whatsoever as far as this is concerned. But yet at the LC, the kind of firing and the other actions which are going on, I think for the next month and a half, like I said, the bat actions might stop, but the firing it does not, the bullet does not get hindered by any climatic condition.
Any snow or ice or whatever.
So I think that we should be more prepared for, and you know, our expenditure, ammunition expenditure, etc. will be high. So you know, we have to be careful about that and be ready, because at the last resort, the soldier should not have to look over his shoulder for anything, and he should be prepared for whatever.
So the government must you know, look after that factor, that you know, he should be kept supplied and replenished all the time in terms of ammunition. Certainly. But let me expand the scope of discussion a little bit. Looking at Pakistan and the way the Afghanistan situation is developing, the US drawdown, and of course the changeover in the Pakistani military leadership, how do you see the region sort of coping with this as somebody who's worked in diplomacy?
Well, I think the region will continue to see continued turbulence, both in Pakistan-Afghanistan relations, as also in Pakistan's relations with India. But the central question is going to be, how do things internally evolve in Pakistan? Because the fact is that the realities in Pakistan are such that no amount of external factors can really bring about domestic change in Pakistan. That change has to come from within. And if people feel, if the political class, and more than the political class, if sections within the establishment feel that dividends which they expected from Afghanistan policy or of India policy are not forthcoming, perhaps a change of tack is now required. Those are the signs we have to really look out for.
But what about the China factor? Because I was reading somewhere that, you know, the military hardware increasingly in the Pakistani military is now Chinese origin. It may not be 80% as somebody has claimed, but at least 50 to 60%. And China would want its, you know, the CPAC, the China-Pak Economic Corridor, to go through and peace to prevail in that area. Would they play some, you know, sort of role in Pakistan changing its policy towards India or towards Afghanistan?
No, for China, this is a very, very big stakeholder in their economic drive, their overall geostrategy. The fact of the matter is that the Americans are no longer as close to Pakistan, and they will not be able to supply the billions which they were giving earlier. So Pakistan also has to look forward to where will they get their weaponry from. Their enmity with India is not going to decrease by any chance. and they need for that, and for that they've got a good friend in China, but there is a quid pro quo which they have to give, and that's why this economic corridor, etc. And whether it's with their actual local populace, it's not going that great. That's what news. Balochistan and Gilgit, etc. is one part, but even the rest of the country, they don't expect, because they are being sold out. If that is so. But the relationship, as far as we are concerned, as India is concerned, definitely anything weaponry, if they keep on getting armed, if it was earlier by the Americans, now by the Chinese, as far as we are concerned, they are still having that kind of benefit.
It's a threat in any case.
Absolutely.
That is there. But do you agree that the Chinese are now influencing Pakistan policy?
I think the Chinese have always had a certain influence in Pakistan. But I don't think we should take the emphasis which is in Pakistan's domestic narrative on China and the China-Pakistan economic corridor at face value. This is really part of one investment which the Chinese are making, and it's all over the world. I think in Pakistan, for domestic reasons, for reasons of isolation, for reasons of loss of morale, they have picked on this as being the silver bullet which will solve all their problems. I don't think we should take that narrative at face value. The real challenges in Pakistan are internal. They are very much related to the internal security situation in that country, and that really corrodes the whole investment profile of Pakistan for the next 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. Until that changes, whether it is the Chinese or whether it's the Americans or whether it's the Japanese, the investment environment is not going to change. So I think that reality is very much part of Pakistan today.
You see, one thing when we are looking forward to, from this particular point, I see that is the military option which everybody keeps talking, you've done one strike, you've done whatever you're doing now. But frankly speaking, as long as people realize that this is just one of the many things which is to be done, actually the diplomatic drive which has taken place over the, even before this action all took place, with the Prime Minister moving around and getting the whole world opinion, etc. Now at least people are talking about it. Pakistan being a terrorist state at least is known to more people than one. And therefore, whether it is the economic factor or the diplomacy or the political, I think those have to be pushed through, and that
it just cannot be the military option, is what you're saying.
And those ones also need to not to be slowed down, because I think the momentum which one has got now, that has to be carried through. I think that is most important.
Right. But the diplomatic effort that India has done isolating any country like Pakistan is difficult, but do you think India's efforts have also played a bit of a part in putting pressure on Pakistan in terms of other factors like the Indus Water Treaty being revisited, or at least being talked as being revisited? Will that have any effect on Pakistan?
It does have some effect. All these factors do have a role. But the most important thing to my mind is to understand that Pakistan doesn't need to be isolated. It feels isolated. And it is that sense of internal isolation which really corrodes, as I said, public morale and public confidence. Now, the fact is, a policy of isolating Pakistan is inevitably going to have diminishing returns, because you are dealing with a situation where the country is already having a very poor image internationally. So it is not as if there is very much more to be done. But I think sensible people in Pakistan understand the critical period that country is going through, and the requirement, therefore, that there has to be a policy shift where it comes to giving sanctuary to these terrorist groups or using them for political to attain political objectives.
So that strategic asset that they use, maybe there has to be a change in that, but we have run completely out of time. I think Pakistan needs to sort of introspect a little bit on its policy of using terrorists as deep assets or strategic assets against India. If that doesn't change, maybe Pakistan will get further, not just isolated, but further will come under pressure from the international community. And that is something that India will hope that will bring in some change in approach and sort of both the neighbors can live peacefully. But that's a fond hope. Let's hope that the situation does improve both on the border and in the relations between the two countries. But on that note, I must end this program and thank both my panelists for their insights, which are of course born out of their experience there. We'll come back again in a fortnight's time. Till then, goodbye.